This is Real News Media TV, coverage you can trust. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Select all for daily news updates. Good morning, my Real News Media TV family. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning, and I'm wishing for everyone a wonderful and a productive day. And in the news this morning for May 27, 2023, man who allegedly brandished a gun on girlfriend denied bail. A St. Catherine man who allegedly drew a gun on his girlfriend following a disagreement was denied bail when he appeared in the St. Catherine Parish Court on Friday. Wheel alignment technician Owen Wint of a Portmore St. Catherine address is before the court on a charge of possession of a prohibited weapon. He is to return to court on June 12. It is alleged that on May 15, the complainant was at home when the accused visited and requested that she return to him items he had bought to her. She called the police and the team intervened and Wint left. However, it is alleged that Wint later went back to her home and drew a gun from his waistband and renewed his demand. The woman reported the matter to the police and Wint was subsequently arrested and charged. Judges uphold 20-year sentence for man who hired a killer. His job was to hire the alleged triggerman behind Tamara Geddes' death, and for that, Owen Irving believed that his 20-year sentence was too harsh. The Court of Appeal, however, disagreed, noting that if he was indicted for murder under the Offenses Against the Person Act, he would have been facing a death penalty or life imprisonment. The 36-year-old victim was murdered in her room at Reserve Trelawney on June 19, 2020, after her sister Nadine plotted her demise. The appellant, Owen Irving, interestingly had also collected payment from Nadine to arrange the killing of her brother's girlfriend, Tanisha Miller, after she reportedly stabbed him to death during a dispute. Irving, who is in his late 50s, was sentenced in March 2021 to 20 years in prison for Tamara's murder and 5 years for conspiracy to murder in relation to Miller after pleading guilty. The court had ruled that Irving must serve 15 years in prison before being considered for parole. Irving, who is among 5 persons, including Tamara's sister and her 2 daughters, who were convicted for the shocking murder, also felt that the 5-year conspiracy charge was also excessive. Following his conviction, Irving appealed his sentences before a single judge in the Court of Appeal and was refused last May. He later renewed his application before the 3-judge panel, who, following a hearing in February and March of this year, again refused the application. Irving had appealed on the ground that his sentence was harsh, manifestly excessive, and cannot be justified. But the appellate judges in a recently published judgment did not accept that the sentences are manifestly excessive. The circumstances of the offenses are quite disturbing and shocking. In fact, the applicant could have been indicted for murder falling within Section 21E of the OAPA, circumstances of a contract killing, and would have been liable to be sentenced pursuant to Section 31A of the OAPA, which provides for a potential penalty of death or life imprisonment with a stipulated statutory minimum term of 20 years imprisonment before eligibility for parole. This court would only interfere with the sentences if they were excessive or inadequate, to such an extent as to satisfy this court that when they were passed there was a failure to apply the right principles, the judgment said further. The judges noted that Irving, in a caution statement, had admitted to being paid $230,000 by Nadine to facilitate the killing of her sister. The triggerman had reportedly agreed to carry out the murder for $500,000, and his caution statement alleged that Irving had piloted him to Tamara Geddes' home on the night of the killing. In the second incident, Irving and his spouse Tashana Young, his co-accused, received $500,000 from Nadine to arrange Miller's murder. According to the Court of Appeal judges, the sentencing judge may not have demonstrated his application of the sentencing principles in the orderly manner as set out in the case of Misha Clement versus R and Daniel Ralston versus R, but his attempt at applying the prescribed methodology was evident. They noted that the sentencing judge considered Irving's early guilty plea, aggravating and mitigating factors, and the time spent in pre-sentence remand. Tamara Geddes was killed when a lone gunman entered her room and robbed her of 2 cell phones. The alleged killer also reportedly demanded sex and was refused. The woman's 6-year-old daughter, who was present at the time of her murder, escaped unharmed. During the night of her death, Nadine reportedly told her daughter that the men were outside in the yard. It is reported that prior to her death, Tamara Geddes damaged her sister's water tank and that they had several disputes which frustrated her sister. She also pleaded guilty to murder and a conspiracy to murder and received similar sentences. Her 2 daughters, Shanice Ruddock and the other, who was 15 at the time, were both given 3-year suspended sentences after pleading misprision of felony. Misprision of felony is a crime that occurs when someone knows a felony has been committed but fails to inform the authorities about it. Irving's spouse also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Meanwhile, the alleged triggerman Brian Shelley remains in prison and is yet to plead, as he is yet to settle legal representation. His case is expected to be mentioned next month. A 7th person, Rexon Knott, a welder of Norwood St. James, was also implicated but was freed after the prosecution offered no evidence against him. Opposition calls for accountability in distribution of black tanks. The parliamentary opposition is calling for accountability in the distribution of black tanks in drought-affected areas. Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced that $20 million was to be spent to purchase and distribute black tanks to alleviate the effects of the drought. Speaking in the Senate on Friday, Opposition Senator Sophia Fraser-Binns said that there must be integrity in how the black tanks are managed.
How many black tanks were purchased and how were they distributed and to whom were they distributed and by whom? Because this is also important. It's one thing to say $20 million was spent, but we don't know how it was spent, who benefited from it. And I think this is something that, some more information is required in the spirit of accountability. I just want to put in a plug here because we know history has a way of repeating itself, that as it relates to the distribution of black tanks, that the utmost integrity should be applied to ensure, one, at the end of the day, that anything untoward had happened in the distribution.
In response, Minister with responsibility for water, Matthew Samuda, said the $20 million was used to purchase 454 200-gallon and 260 400-gallon water tanks in total, or about 11 tanks per constituency.
This is a very small stopgap that was put in place in the areas where we had reports of the least efficiency in delivering water. So MPs were asked to identify these areas, and they've been working with NWC for the distribution of these tanks. The bigger program, that 50,000 target, will follow the same process that the social housing process uses. There will be a social inquiry, there will be a committee by parish that will ensure that the recommendations from MPs are validated. It will be people on path, it will be persons that fall in a geographic space that does not have NWC footprint, or the NWC footprint is so poor that they may be getting water once a week. We will be geotagging all of these tanks. All of the appropriate oversight agencies will be able to log in, be able to go and geographically find where each tank went and see that it met the criteria.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Select all for daily news updates.